big bad
Hey y'all,
John.
my name is John Mitchell and I'm a certified financial coach. The purpose of this video and this YouTube channel is to teach you how to master the personal finance basics. In today's YouTube video, we're going to be discussing how the Fed slashed interest rates and the possible pivot that could be ahead because of it. On September 17th, 2025, the Fed cut interest rates by 0.25%, or also known as 25 basis points. This was the first rate cut since December of last year in 2024. Who is the Fed, you might ask? Well, the Federal Reserve, also known as the Fed, is a U.S. central bank created by the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 to establish a monetary system that could respond effectively to stresses in the banking system. Again, I'll have more of that linked on the Fed website in the description down below. So now we know that the Fed is the central bank for the United States. What does it mean when they cut interest rates? Well, the Fed's target rate is the basis for bank-to-bank lending. So the rate that banks charge their most credit-worthy corporate customers is known as the prime lending rate. It's linked directly to the Federal Reserve's target rate and is often simply referred to as the prime. To boil that down real quick, essentially, it just makes borrowing money cheaper for banks to do between each other. If you had a mortgage or a car payment or even a credit card payment before, I'm sure y'all would also appreciate if your interest rates were lowered as well. By making debt more affordable, that means on the inverse, having things like savings accounts, high yield savings accounts, and CDs means their interest rates could possibly go lower as well. The most common debt that people associate with decreasing an interest rate in relation to a Fed interest rate cut is mortgages. But what's interesting about that is typically that doesn't actually correlate. Now, yes, usually if the interest rate goes down, interest rates for mortgages will go down. And I guess to be fair, we're talking about fixed rate mortgages specifically. But actually, the fixed rate mortgages are more typically associated with the 10-year U.S. Treasury. The reason for that is because long-term investors typically look at the 10-year Treasury as the benchmark for how long-term investments are doing over time. And of course, for a fixed rate mortgage, most people by and large, unless you're a Ramsey fan doing your 15 or 20-year mortgage, are doing 30-year mortgages. So if you just base it off of a rate cut that happens now that affects short-term debt mostly, or variable interest rates, you're really not going to see that change to fixed rate long-term debt in the short term. Now, what does typically happen is if there's a continual pattern of decrease in the Fed making interest rate cuts, we will also see the yield on the 10-year Treasury go down as well. And because the yield on that Treasury goes down, mortgages will typically follow that as well. If you have not already, like and subscribe to this video as it helps me see what content you all like and want to see in the future. All right, so now what's all this nonsense about having a pivot in policy? So if you remember back to COVID, essentially the Fed dropped interest rates to I think near 0%. And what they wanted to do was stimulate the economy by encouraging people to borrow money so that money would flow through the economy and keep businesses running during the COVID pandemic. Once we got through the COVID pandemic, the Fed started jacking rates up at just about every one of their meetings they had, and they jacked rates up all the way until July of 2023, which was the last rate increase we saw during this whole strain of increases. Since July of 2023, over the last almost a little over 2 years now, we've seen interest rates drop about 1.25%, which is a lot more flat relative to the speed in which interest rates were jacked up in years prior to that. Essentially, this big pivot is that we're now seeing the continual decline of interest rates, and we think they'll continue even more. So right now I'm showing up the dot plot. What this dot plot does is it shows where the members on the board of the Fed want interest rates to be in the coming years. So if we look at 2025, the Fed is pretty split between just over 4% and just under 3.75%. So we might see one more rate cut this year before the year's over. In 2026, they're pretty kind of split amongst the board. So if we just cut that in half, we could guess that interest rates might be in the 3.25% to 3.5%. And then same the year following in 2027, they might jump down 1.25% at about that 3% average. And it looks like for 2028 and even possibly further out from there, they plan to kind of hold that 3% interest rate in the future. Now, again, this is by no means a guarantee. It's just where the Fed members voted on where they want interest rates to go and where we might see interest rates on debt in the future. I hope you got something out of today's video. I hope you learn a little bit more about the Fed, cutting interest rates and what that means for debt, and even things like savings accounts in regards to those interest rates in the short and even long term. If you want to know where I got the information for my video today, I have all the sources linked in the description down below. Check them out. They're really great resources and give you way more in-depth information than a short video like this to kind of give you that quick synopsis. If you're looking for a financial coach to help you better understand what this means for you and how you can change your personal finances to use this in your favor, schedule an appointment with me today at the link in the comment section and in my description down below. Schedule an appointment and I'll set you up for success today. I love each and every one of you, and I'll see y'all in the next video.